Hi, I'm Gary Lerude, technical editor at Microwave Journal. I'd like to welcome you to the third episode in our series of video conversations discussing marketing in the age of COVID-19, produced by Microwave Journal and Signal Integrity Journal. Although it seems the world is on hold, many RF microwave companies are considered essential businesses and continue to operate. They're supporting the communications networks we rely on and the sensors ensuring our national security. Given this unprecedented health challenge, how are these companies managing their manufacturing operations and supply chains while protecting the health of employees? And how are they telling their customers, we are ready to ship? To explore these questions, we've invited Ted Heil, president of Mini Circuits, Joel Levine, president of RFMW, and Carl Sheffres, publisher of Microwave Journal and Signal Integrity Journal, to share their perspectives. Ted, Joel, and Carl, welcome.
Thanks very much for having us, Gary.
Good to see you, Gary.
Good to be here.
Let's start with the questions. Ted, you are in probably the hot spot of the COVID-19 pandemic, one of the hardest hit areas of the country. Tell us about the steps that Mini Circuits has taken to keep your operations going and your employees safe.
Yeah, it's kind of a dubious honor to be located in New York City these days. But fortunately for us, for all of the members at Mini Circuits, we're doing quite well. For us, the journey, the whole COVID journey, and the preparation and the reaction, for us, it really started back in January. We have a facility in China. And so been very intimate with the progression of the pandemic from the very early days, right around the Lunar New Year, where our facility was shut down. We actually started to acquire PPE masks and gloves in support of our operations in China. Little did we know that we were going to need those ourselves a few short weeks later. Then once the virus started to spread outside of China, we saw it enter Europe. We started to get very serious. We had to put in place a planning activity in and around the late February timeframe. I want to send out a big thanks to Keysight. When we started our planning, we thought it would be best to pick some of the brains of the best and the brightest. And for us, Keysight is a stalwart of our industry. We talked to Henry Comrie over there, and he's a VP of operations in Santa Rosa. And he helped us create our playbook, an escalation plan that goes through multiple phases and prepares us in the event that things start to escalate regionally, locally, as we start to if people get sick within our factory, we established this plan. Little did we know that it was only going to be a few weeks that we were going to have to implement it, which included almost an immediate work from home policy. About half of our staff, which in Brooklyn, New York, oddly enough, we still have a manufacturing content as well as a lot of engineering and administrative. About half of that could work from home. So the plan included a very strong work from home policy. And there was the runaround to get VPNs and voice and all the equipment so that people can, about 250 people can now overnight work from home. And those that are on site, we were able to put in place the plan that we envisioned, which is separating people heavily. We have PPE, gloves, masks for all of the members that are on site. We have 100% temperature taking every day. We have a policy, an escalation policy in the event that someone is tested positive, how we quarantine the site, how we trace and quarantine the people around them. So we'd have to take this policy and live it and act it in real time. And those are the things that we've done. To be very honest with you, I don't know if we're lucky or good, but it has worked out. Granted, we were playing audibles every day. It seemed like our plan lasted 2 hours, but it was effective. And we were managed throughout the entire, now is 8 weeks, that we've been able to fulfill orders to our customers. So our warehouse has been operating nonstop. The receiving of raw materials and the receiving of products that we manufacture all over Asia and in Israel we've been managed to bring those in. So the receiving function is operational. And like I said, either we're very lucky or we did have a good plan.
Well, you mentioned the spread of it around the globe and with your various locations. What kind of interaction did you have among those different sites sharing best practices?
Yeah, that was a big deal for us because we realized early on that communication was a key. That when you're dealing with something like this, as everyone has, there is the reality of people getting sick, and then there's the fear factor, and the both of these are extremely damaging to an organization. So communication was super critical, just from transparency, let everybody know what's going on. But we also use the same communication channel to communicate the policies and procedures that we were putting in place in New York, because they translated everywhere in all of our sites: Malaysia, China, India, Israel. But we made sure that every site had the ability to augment that plan with local restrictions. I was mentioning to Carl earlier, in India, for example, which, by the way, just opened up this week, um, we not only have to put in all the precautions for those on site, but we had to provide transportation. So overnight, they had to adapt to the local restrictions. We have 850 people in India. We're allowed to staff half of those on site. We had to come up with transportation for 400 people, renting buses, creating traffic routes, organizing pickup. Overnight, we had to become a logistics company. And that was a local flavor adapting to the base plan that we generated in New York.
Amazing. Are you seeing more than the normal delays from suppliers, and how are you working around supply chain delays?
Yeah, sure. We're not immune to this because of all the lockdowns across the world. And oddly enough, those lockdowns, you can see them happen and follow the pandemic. As first it was China. So our printed circuit board suppliers, which are mostly in China, and some of the headers that we use for our small SMT parts, they were all shut down, and we had delay there. Then as China opened up, we saw that move to the rest of Asia and chip components, and eventually some of our European suppliers and our U.S. suppliers. Right now, it's the metal suppliers that are coming out of India that are delayed. These delays, what they tend to do is they don't tend to last forever. They tend to last for a few weeks. We've been able to work through it because on the smaller stuff, and we're a privately held company, so we don't get stressed too much about the inventory that a lot of people who have to report in the public domain do. We've managed it through stocking, early stocking, not just for the pandemic, for some of the shortages that have been occurring for the last several years. The other ones, the big ones like PCBs and metal, they've been a little more challenged, and we have taken a hit on some of our deliverables. But all in all, I would say the shortages creep up for a few weeks, and then you're able to work around, either relocate the supply or expedite like crazy.
Quite a logistics challenge.
Yeah.
So, Joel, let me switch to you. Your business is more dealing with finished goods coming in and going out. How are you managing your operations and keeping them running, and at the same time keeping your employees safe?
Well, it's funny because a lot of what Ted said was exactly what we went through as far as being an essential business. We realized right off the bat, day one, from the Santa Clara and San Francisco Bay Area lockdown, that we would be exempt because we were an essential business. The good news about RFMW is that we normally have most of our people, with the exception of the San Jose headquarters, most of our people work from home. We're essentially, with the exception of the distribution facilities, we're basically a sales and marketing company, and all the salespeople and the marketing people are working out of their houses. And so we basically only had to move maybe 10 people out of the San Jose facility, 2 or 3 in accounting, export control, which was probably the major impact as far as not being here, and then the inside salespeople and marketing. From the other point of internet access, we actually did have one employee that did not have internet access at his home. And that was actually the same guy from the cubicle that you've seen on the internet, where he has a tube turntable, but he doesn't have internet service at home. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But we got everybody up and running, and I don't think we've really missed a beat. The more difficult one was the interaction between the warehouse and export control. but they've been doing that from home. One or two extra steps. Our hero in this one was, I've never felt better as far as having sold the company to TPI, because from the perspective of being financially stable, our people feel comfortable as far as that goes from the point of view of being financially stable. Plus, also from the processes of wearing masks and gloves and cleaning and all the things that go along with that. They took the lead because they have, I forget how many gazillion square feet of warehouse in Texas between them and Mauser. And they really know what they're doing. So we took the lead from them, and we're hopefully making everybody comfortable. And like I said, the mental issue of having a financially stable company behind us, I think is really good for everybody involved. So, and again, we also duplicated the same processes in our Singapore, Israel, UK, and Hong Kong warehouses. So it's like, I don't think we've missed a beat. We're doing pretty good. And again, I don't want to copy Ted, but because we're basically a private company, we don't care as much about inventory. Over the last year, we've increased our available inventory tremendously. So we've been in good shape, and we really haven't seen much in the way of shortages, and we're servicing our customers accordingly.
That's great. Carl, how about Microwave Journal and Signal Integrity Journal? What's been the response to the pandemic there?
So we probably fall somewhere in between mini circuits and RFMW, in that we had some of our staff working from home on a regular basis, as you know, Gary, mostly to avoid the commute around Boston. So we had a number of people already working from home and set up that way. For the rest of the staff, our IT department did a great job of getting everybody up to speed. Those that didn't have laptops, got laptops, gave them VPN access. So it was really pretty smooth and seamless, amazingly. And our IT department also got everybody set up with the appropriate tools. So we've been using Microsoft Teams mostly to stay connected during the day, and that's proven very effective. People that weren't used to using it quickly get up to speed out of necessity, as I'm sure many of our audience have done as well. We're using, doing a lot of Zoom meetings, staff meetings on a regular basis, just to update everybody on our activities and discuss any issues that we might have. Also for Friday happy hours, which has been a nice way to get everybody together at the end of the week and kind of de-stress a little bit. But we're not a manufacturer, so we don't have some of the issues that the other guys have. We don't have to worry about factory safety, which of course is a big issue. Our magazine is printed by actually the country's largest printer, Quad Graphics, out in Wisconsin. They have a number of facilities across the country, so we haven't had an issue, and if we did, they would move our printing to another facility. We haven't had any problems in shipping the magazine either. Everything has been running smoothly. And of course, our subscribers can access the magazine in print, digital, on the mobile app or on our website. So there's many options for getting that content anyways. Our main office, when we do reopen, which we're in Massachusetts and they're talking about starting that next week. So in our office, we're all pretty spaced fairly well apart, as you know, and I expect that when we return to the facility, it's probably going to be staggered, with some staff continuing to work remotely and others working in the office every other day or something like that. We're still working out the logistics. And hopefully that return will be fairly soon, but I'm sure only when it's safe to do so.
Back to you, Ted. It sounds like it's almost business as usual, although a lot of complexity wrapped around it. How are you communicating to your customers that things are working pretty well?
Well, we have a couple of channels, but to be very honest with you, we created it's not really rocket science. We created a page on our website like most people have, and we update that weekly. We initiated an email effort through our email list for customers who want to opt in so that they get a direct communication. And then we've been really good about keeping all of our customer service reps fully up to speed multiple times a week, because more often than not, we're getting the emails from our customers asking us to what is our status, and so we've been able to respond seamlessly and with a consistent message. And I think that's been a real big important thing, is that we can keep the message without a lot of hysteria. I mean, we're all dealing with that today, and it's really challenging, especially for those that are really sequestered at home, to not throw too much hysteria in it. So our ability to deliver on time and give an even consistent message through our website and through email have really been advantage for us.
Joel, anything that RFMW has done other than probably your normal ERP type connections in terms of shipping, expected shipping dates and that sort of thing?
Now, we did, again, more or less a lot of the same things Ted mentioned. The email blasts were key at the very beginning to our entire customer base. The same thing with the website. We let people know via LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and key to the whole thing is obviously our sales organization calling people. Plus our operations group has been filling out forms left and right as far as people wondering about supply chain and things like that and how it may or may not be interrupted. But we've been totally communicating. The other part about it is like we said before also, communicating to our own people. You know, we have 135 people throughout the world, and we've done a lot of the same things, you know, gotten on Zoom. People from TTI and RFMW have gotten together from the family of companies, and it's worked out well. I think I'm seeing more people now, unfortunately, virtually than I did in real life. You know, it's a lesson to be learned.
Well, certainly communication, especially internal communication, is important. Joel, you're probably in a unique position at RFMW in that you have a pretty good view over the entire RF microwave industry. What's your sense of the impact the pandemic is having on the overall industry's ability to manufacture and ship products?
I am pleasantly surprised that we have not had any problems at all, or very few minor problems. The same thing that our customers have done to us, we surveyed every one of our suppliers as far as what they were doing, what's going on in their world. And we've been pleasantly surprised that really no glitches or anything. You know, there might be some minuscule stuff, but nothing major. All of our suppliers seem to be up and running. One of our suppliers has people actually living in their factory in shifts during a shutdown. So they continue to supply accordingly. And again, knock on wood, or however you want to say it, so far so good as far as the supply chain goes into RFMW and from us getting it to the customers also.
That's great news. Well, we've been talking about shipping products. Let's shift to the design cycle. Ted, what's the engagement you're seeing with designers working on new products? Has any tempo of the new design cycle dropped off for mini circuits?
I would say it's really regional and product line specific, the impact. So we have design centers in the US, in New York, Israel, India, Malaysia, and the experience and the efficiency has been different in each of the locations. In the US, all of our engineers or designers are working from home, but because we're open, they have access to come in and work in the lab as required. We also design our LTCC products here in New York, and that group is really an HFSS group. We fab in Asia, so they've been actually very efficient because they don't have a lot of prototype on the bench time. We also support them with a characterization team who's been on site throughout this whole thing. So test, characterization, qualification. In Israel, our engineers have been on site since the beginning. They have not had to work. We work different shifts. We spread them out, but there's been virtually no impact for the VCOs and the test equipment that we're designing out of there. India has been impacted because they were on a complete and total lockdown. So our design pipeline slowed down. And even now that we've just begun to open, we've had to shift we've had to favor the production staff over the engineers to get in. They can work remotely to a certain point, but they're designing products that need to be tested on the bench, and that's an intimate part of the design cycle. So I would say, in an overall, it's really a function of the region and the local restrictions and the type of product that they're designing.
Exactly. Joel, from your perspective, how are your sales folks seeing the design cycle? Are you seeing a lack of tempo in customers across the world?
I'd say our salespeople are frustrated that they can't get in to see customers, but we grew up as a company back in 2003, working virtually almost. So we're almost back to our roots. What we do as kind of acting component engineers for some of our customers, we're still doing the same thing. Unfortunately, like most of it's not face-to-face, or none of, what am I saying, most of it? None of it is face-to-face except maybe over Zoom or Meet or Team, but we still get emails and we're still getting phone calls and we're still having people asking us the same questions. What 1 watt MMIC do I use for this application, or what do you recommend across your suppliers? So from that perspective, it slowed down a bit, but not as much as you would expect it to. So we're still recommending product, still communicating that way. And one of the other things that we've been doing is really upping our training also internally for our people. Corvo did a great sales meeting a couple of weeks ago, and we've been doing a lot of training. So there's a lot in the spots where there's nothing going on with the customer. Our people have plenty to do as far as keeping going and learning more about some of the new future products also.
When you get questions from customers asking how to use a part, or they're trying to use a part and it's not working, how many of your staff are kind of on the bench helping them? And is it a problem working from home, or can they actually take some of their test equipment home with them?
Okay, so the reality is we really only have 2 applications engineers in RFMW, and they're both focused on RF power. For the most part, we utilize the services of our suppliers' applications engineering team. So once again, we're doing it a lot by Zoom and a lot by meetings and solving. It's interesting how much you can solve. And again, sometimes I feel like we're doing more face-to-face stuff, even though it's virtual, and getting a lot more answers to customers and through our suppliers. So in some respects, it's working out well. But we depend a lot on our suppliers' applications engineering team more than our own.
And Ted, it sounds like some of your engineers have access to the lab and test equipment. How about on the app side? Are you able to doing that, support questions that you normally get?
Yeah, I think maybe we're organized a little differently than a lot of companies. Even though we have a strong applications engineering team, they're really focused on, about 10 of them or so are focused on customer interaction. They've all come through the bench, and so prior to working in apps, they were in the characterization and the qualification test lab. What they do is they're working directly with the customer, and they're creating the test requirements that pass along to our characters or our engineering test lab. Those guys have been on site the whole time, and they're able to execute the test plans according to what the apps engineers write. Fortunately, and maybe, again, I'm better lucky than good, we set up a whole online system, routing system, where the customer requirements through our CRM tool load into applications, shows up on the applications dashboard. They resolve, or they work with the customer. They create a test requirement. That test requirement is routed over to the test team, and then the data gets populated in some database, in some print and file server, so that the applications engineers can review the data prior to getting it to the customer. I will say this: it's really worked out pretty well. But we're super thankful to the team that's on site who's executing those tests.
Definitely. Well, we talked a little bit about communications. You mentioned putting something on the website and emails. Let's talk a little bit about your social media strategy. Starting with you, Ted, I notice historically Mini Circuits has been very active on Instagram. Have you tweaked your social media strategy any?
Um, I, I can't say that we've got an architected strategy change over the COVID-19. If anything, what we've tried to do is be a little more upbeat, let people know that we are functioning, show the more personal side of us and thanking the frontline workers. I mean, in New York City, that has been a huge outpouring of support for all the frontline workers. We see them every day as we're driving or taking the train to work. And then just showing our people. It's been very helpful for us internally, and I think it shows the human side of Mini Circuits that we're still around and still supportive in these really tough times.
That's great. Joel, I notice some LinkedIn postings that some of your folks are following the hashtag or posting to the hashtag cubicles left behind. Is this part of a concerted effort on your part, or it's just kind of organic?
That was the idea of the younger, better-looking Levine, who runs the company now, actually. But we're trying to get some creativity and some human interest into our LinkedIn and maybe Facebook posts. I would say we're evolving mostly because I'm mostly product-oriented and have literally been running the Twitter feed myself with the help of the new marketing team, which the other part of that is we're evolving because John Hamilton has a new marketing team behind him also. So I'd say on some of the social media sites, we're going to be more human interest oriented, maybe on LinkedIn and Facebook that way, but we're going to stick to product, primarily product releases and things like that, as far as our typical PR and our Twitter feed, at least as long as I'm still with the company, or until they change my mind.
And you have the right to do that. Although we don't yet know the details of IMS moving to a virtual conference and exhibition, Ted, how are you thinking about conveying your messages without having a physical booth?
Yeah, that's really up in the air because up until, and I checked the website yesterday, there was really not any guidance or indication of how the IMS organizing committee or the organizing team is gonna roll this out. There's such a wide variety of options. As I got mentioned to Carl earlier, I'm sure the conference is going to go off without a hitch. It's you guys have done it with EDICon online. This is a normal fare. But how are they going to run the exhibition? How are they going to let the exhibitors? What are they going to offer to us? I think we'll need time to work through that. Preparing the content is not so terrible, especially for us, because we're in the constant contact generation business here. But how we present it and what channels are going to be open to us, I think we're really looking for feedback, some set of guidance from the IMS on how it's going to work.
Joel, how about you from your perspective?
As soon as IMS mentioned that they might do a virtual trade show, we started scratching our heads and figuring out how that would work. But we went to all of our suppliers to say, hey, if you're in, we're in, depending on what the format of the trade show looks like. The other thing we're doing is we're kind of experimenting, but we have our own virtual trade show coming out in June 10th and 11th called Reality 2020, which is going to look at 5G, IoT in the cloud from a bunch of the suppliers, both from RFMW, Symmetry Electronics, which is one of our sister companies in the TTI family. And so we're going to put out a bunch of things. We're doing things on 5G, both with Corvo and Amplion, but we're also looking at our sister companies that can do things on IoT in the cloud. So there'll be more from that advertised through Microwave Journal and other ways. Again, email blasts and things like that also. So it's kind of a wait and see to see what happens with IMS. The thing we can't figure out is how to have a virtual party like we usually have every year. So,
yeah, we'll miss that.
yeah.
Carl, from your perspective as a publisher, what recommendations do you have for companies that want to communicate that their operations are running pretty normally during this interesting time that we're living through, at the same time not wanting those companies to be tone deaf to the disruption of society and the loss of life?
Yeah, I think that's important. And, my main advice is just to be straightforward and honest, I think is what people are looking for these days, and have empathy. I think you should, companies should tell their customers, here's what we can and can't do in this current situation. Report any delays in product or in shipping, and I think customers will understand these days. The best thing companies can do is to communicate with all their stakeholders by just using clear, compassionate, and timely messages. I think Mini Circuits and RFMW are both doing a good job of, it's clearly noted on their websites. There's a COVID statement, status updates on the RFMW site. So they're doing a good job of informing, their customers of what's going on with their companies, and that's the best thing you can do. I would also suggest it's important not to overdo it. I think everybody's inboxes are flooded these days with COVID-19 emails. So, I would keep communication, keep it thoughtful, strategic, and fluid, and remain on brand. Just communicate major announcements, business changes that will directly affect your customers, but leave out information that's irrelevant to them. If you don't have any major announcements, then your messaging should be more informational and supportive, I think. If your goal is to regularly check in with customers, leverage social media, as the representatives here are doing, Ted and Joel. They're doing a good job of utilizing social media. I think it's important. It's a good way to keep a regular flow of information and communication going. And finally, I think, crises like this one can be defining moments for an organization's reputation. And, companies and organizations are going to be judged by how they deal with things when they go wrong, less so when they're doing good things, more so when things are not going right. So it's vital to maintain open, honest communications with your stakeholders, particularly customers, and in order to weather this time of uncertainty.
Well, Ted, Joel, and Carl, thank you for a very interesting discussion. I think it's encouraging that we as an industry have been able to navigate these rapids as well as we have, particularly Ted and Joel with your international organizations, where you've basically had to respond to this as the pandemic circled the globe. And as we start to gradually reopen, let's wish ourselves all good luck to our firms and our staffs.
Yeah, and a big thank you to all of our members, our employees, who have really just done an outstanding job throughout this whole thing. They really they lift my spirit amazingly.
Yeah,
it's teamwork, and it's great to see. Thank you, guys.
Okay, thank you.
thanks,
Our
guys.
next episode, which will be available next week, will explore how companies can succeed with virtual events. So Ted and Joel, you might want to watch that. Janine Love, our editor of Signal Integrity Journal, will speak with Marie Hatter, who is the Chief Marketing Officer at Keysight Technologies. Thanks everyone for watching today.